Good evening, and welcome to the December 6th, 2021 episode of the JA Company Program Speaker Series. I am Paul Kappel, your host this evening, and also president of Junior Achievement here in Southeastern Pennsylvania. And I am very excited to welcome Andrew Dahlgren. Andrew is going to talk to us a little bit about his experience and his career. And for those of you who've joined us for a few of these episodes this season, you'll remember we've had quite a few entrepreneurs and also those who've worked with entrepreneurs. And it sounds like Andrew's going to really fill both of those roles and tells us about what he has done both in his own efforts, but then helping other entrepreneurs in the community. So Andrew, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So, hey, we'll start off by just a pretty easy question, and that's, just tell us a little bit about yourself and, what's kind of brought you here this evening.
Sure. So I would say I wear a lot of different hats in a lot of different situations. My formal background, educationally, is in industrial design. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in industrial design, and I've worked as a maker, as a designer, as an entrepreneur. I've worked as a teacher, teaching product design and industrial design. Currently, I work full-time for an organization called Urban Manufacturing Alliance. And what we do is we help entrepreneurs that are in the making and manufacturing space, grow their businesses, overcome struggles, get access to resources, the things that they need to really be successful as entrepreneurs.
So, is that just the Philly area? Is that a national organization? Tell us a little bit about your footprint.
Sure, yeah. I work on initiatives all across the country, both here in Philadelphia and in places like Detroit and Seattle and Birmingham, Alabama, and New York, all over the place. One of the things that's really interesting is that entrepreneurs, exist everywhere, and they're working on all sorts of different things. But unfortunately, there's a lot of consistent kind of struggles and barriers. A lot of the companies we hear and learn about here in Philadelphia are very similar to their kind of counterparts in other cities across the country. And so part of what we do, and through UMA and other projects I'm attached to, is we try to find those kind of consistent ways that we can help kind of create best practices to support entrepreneurs, but also find ways to support in ways that are unique to the place, like here in Philadelphia.
So it sounds a little bit like not just providing resources to entrepreneurs, but also starting to build a network so they can interact with each other as well. Is that a fair assessment?
Yep, that's a great way of saying it. Yeah, we like the buzzword ecosystem, where there's a lot of, an ecosystem consists of both the business owners themselves, but also their supporters, their customers, the support networks, those who do entrepreneur education, those who do capital access, the places that offer technical assistance, all the different connections you can imagine. We try to help make those connections possible and stronger.
And this may be a tough question to answer, but what is the typical group that works with you? Is it a startup? Is it a more established organization? One person, a lot of people? What would that look like?
Well, that's actually one of the things that's exciting about our work is we work with that whole spectrum, right? We work with what we call solo entrepreneurs. We work with established companies. We work with startups. We work with companies who have had successful products and are looking to scale those products either through accessing new markets, accessing new product lines. It really runs the whole gamut. And part of what we try to do is uncover like the different needs for those different scales, but we try to make sure all those needs are filled in some way.
And, when we talk about needs, right, that's what entrepreneurs do. They look in the community and they fill a need, a service, a product. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it might be a new product. Sometimes it might be just a new way of looking at something. So tell us a little bit about what need you saw in the community and kind of the path that you took to get you to where you are today.
I would definitely say I had a wandering path. Like I actually, when I first left graduate school with my degree in design, I was really interested in becoming a manufacturer myself. And so I joined forces with a couple of the woodworkers, and we had a business that was doing custom furniture and custom fabrication for clients. We we'd have a very specific, conversation with a client, and they would say, I want this piece of furniture. We would design it, source materials, build it, and deliver it. And then I went from there. I got more familiar with manufacturing and textiles, and so I started doing research into both what type of wearable products would customers be interested in buying, but I also found that there was a need for to be a contract manufacturer, which means I would collaborate with designers. They would tell me what to manufacture, and I would help them make it and help deliver it. And it was through those two initiatives that I started to realize that there were these kind of common struggles among me and my other kind of entrepreneurial friends that would kind of require this solution being an ecosystem of supporters. And so kind of that was the path that I took. And while initially I thought me as an entrepreneur, I would be, making this stuff, designing this stuff, but I've actually found I'm actually much more successful as an entrepreneur helping create the services and the systems that help those businesses.
So from an entrepreneurial journey, oftentimes the first part is the idea, the spark. The second part, of course, is the resources to support that idea. So tell us a little bit about that and what type of either financial or human capital did you need to gather to start this initiative?
So Urban Manufacturing Lines is an organization that existed before me. I've recently joined the team, and we're a small group of three, and we're spread across the country. And in order to get started, a lot of the initial resources were funding to do actually kind of need finding, to actually help kind of uncover what needs manufacturers have, what entrepreneurs are looking for, and really the funding was to do one-on-one research. It was to do surveys. It was to do kind of data gathering to really understand the problems, right, and understand not only the problems, but kind of what form the solutions would have to take, or how the resources would have to function in order to actually be a successful product. In the previous businesses, like when I was doing the textile development, a lot of the resources that were needed was funding to invest in new equipment. It was funding to help train the workforce, funding to do things like marketing and just kind of get the name out there. And ultimately, that was my biggest hurdle was uncovering those resources and trying to gain access to that capital. And in some ways, I like to say that barrier was ultimately good for me because, like I said, it helped me kind of pivot and realize, I could either kind of invest in this one big company and try to make a go of it, or I could kind of find these other ways of supporting makers and manufacturers, which is what I was really most excited about, was finding ways to support other businesses more so than just trying to make my business the one big business.
Gotcha. Okay. So, you've talked a couple of times about research or understanding needs. And so we've got our students that have started their entrepreneurial journey. They've got a cohort that is at this point has probably identified a need that they want to fill and is starting to zero in on what that product or service might be. Mm-hmm. And so tell us a little bit from your perspective, kind of two things we want to talk about is, first of all, you mentioned, research into wearables. So tell us a little bit about how you might want to approach researching potential customer segments, but on a very limited budget, and what our students might want to think about as they reach out into the community to find out if their product or service is viable.
Right. Yeah, I could definitely speak to this through the lens of being a product designer. So I don't have a formal background in like, I don't have an MBA. I don't have any specific kind of entrepreneurial education, but a big part of product design is really uncovering needs and trying to find solutions for this. So what we do is we have a whole kit of what we call design research methods, and that's something that anybody can, if you just simply Google like design research methods, you'll find different tutorials or different kind of collections of tools online, and I can share links with you afterwards if that's helpful. But those design research methods includes things like interviews, right? Like how to interview an individual, and that means like how do you make them feel comfortable? How do you make them, trust you so that what you're going to listen to is going to be protected. But the big goal is to really figure out how do you talk to, say, one or two people, but extrapolate that into a larger audience, right? So you're not just creating something for a market of one. So a big part of that is really trying to understand, how does one person connect to a larger community? And so I always recommend, even starting with your own immediate connections, right? Like everybody is part of lots and lots of different communities. If you play a sport, you're connected to that sporting community. If you go to a faith-based organization, that's a community. If you, if you buy the same brand as other people, that's a community. And so part of what we talk about in product design and in this research phase is really finding ways of asking questions, getting into people's deeper understandings of why they make the choices they do, why they buy the products they do, why they're looking for the solutions that they're looking for, and then try to connect that to an opportunity. And so again, that can be done one-on-one through interviews, through group discussions, through interviews, or other research methods.
Now, I would imagine, oftentimes when you're talking, you're doing those interviews and, in this situation, we'll talk about a product. I would imagine that it's not just as important to understand why someone might find value in your product, but also understanding why someone might not find value in your product. And has that ever happened to you, and how maybe finding out what people didn't like maybe allowed you to change your approach?
Yeah, yes, I would definitely say finding out what people don't like is just as important as what they do like. And actually, one of the things you just said, I think, is important to build on is what do people value? Like if anybody's ever interviewed somebody, or maybe when you're just starting out, you'll find that if you just ask somebody directly, like, what do you like? You're probably going to get a blank stare or a very vague answer. And so part of the kind of work of interviewing is getting people to kind of talk about those deeper values, right? Like, why do they value one product over another? Like, and you can talk to them about what they already buy or what they consume, or what type of music they like, what kind of movies they like. Like, all that information helps you understand what do they value, and that can help you as an entrepreneur understand that your product has to have similar values, regardless of whether it's a product you wear, or an app on your phone, or a vehicle, right? Like, we always, as entrepreneurs, are trying to recreate the values, and we want those values to match our customers. And so part of the practice as a designer and an interview is really trying to get to those deeper connections and figuring out what is it that they're kind of most interested in. And I think sometimes designers hesitate to like show them ideas or share ideas because they want to kind of get it right the first time. But to getting to your point of like, getting feedback about things they don't want, actually sharing really early ideas can actually help people feel engaged and feel like they're part of the design process or part of the kind of product development process, which helps them actually maybe get to that deeper conversation of why they might like something or not something. They can actually be a little bit more comfortable responding to whether they like or don't like your idea, more so than just vaguely asking them what do they like or don't like.
And sometimes, it's funny when you say that. There's an application there to just general fundraising from a nonprofit perspective, that if you bring people in early on the conversation, they're more likely to be advocates or to support your idea because they felt that their ideas were important from the start. And what I think I just heard you say is that can often be just as important in product design as well.
Oh, definitely. I think it can be extremely valuable. And a lot of times I think entrepreneurs think that they have to have some big eureka moment in order to like have a new product or clever idea. But one of the methods that we talk about in product design is asking somebody to bring to a conversation their favorite product or a product that they really would wish worked better, but didn't work as well as they want. And then you have a kind of conversation around like, why is it not working the way they want to? Is it too big? Is it too small? Is it, is there a performance issue? And kind of through that dialogue, you can uncover opportunities to improve on existing products rather than, again, trying to invent something from scratch. And so that's another way, again, to get people more comfortable talking about something. If they can share their own stories about what products work or don't work, that's one way that we find gets to kind of a deeper understanding quicker is getting to those stories of people's actual experiences working with products or using services or et cetera.
No, absolutely. And we can all think of, great business successes from companies that did not necessarily invent the product, but made that product better. I think we can think of examples of, particularly in technology, that's the case. And that applies to everything, from, baking goods to, cars and everything in between. Eventually, though, you have all of these ideas, but you've got to move to a decision point, right? Can you tell us a little bit about, how you get to that decision? At some point, and you mentioned hesitancy before, and I've seen, and myself sometimes analysis paralysis, right? You're
Yep.
trying to take in every bit of data, but tell us a little bit about how do you get to that decision point to move forward?
So in design, we always talk about prototyping quickly and often, and if I'm not sure if y'all talk about the lean startup method, but that's also a big part of that conversation, right? And so one of the things that I came to entrepreneurship and lean startup later in my career, but one of the most interesting things was the overlap between a design process and the kind of entrepreneurial process. And so, yeah, we definitely advocate for prototyping an idea as quickly as you can and giving it to people really in hopes that they break it in the hopes of that they find things wrong with it. And I know it can be very hard for entrepreneurs to not, you want to kind of treat your idea as precious and you want to treat it as it's like it's the most brilliant idea ever. But in reality, we really want people to find mistakes with it so that we can go through that iterative process of finding opportunities to improve it. And so that's always my biggest recommendation is as quickly as you can get audiences who would be your potential customer, really working with the thing that you're trying to create, whether it's through a physical prototype or even just drawings of a prototype. Even asking people, and this is another design research method, is just asking them to kind of imagine a scenario and asking what they would think about different kind of moments in the scenario, especially if you're creating an app or a service that's going to take some technological prototyping first, and you might not be able to invest in that. So yeah, it's always about like, don't be afraid to try an idea, like make it as quickly as you possible, put it in front of people, and that's to me where the most effective decision making is when you actually are giving it to somebody, because you can, as you said, you can constantly reinterpret data, you can constantly ask another expert to give another view on that data. But really, the most influential decisions come directly from customers giving feedback about your ideas and the actual product itself.
So you've gone through that process, right? You've had that idea, you've done your research, you've got to the point where you're going to make a decision to move forward, but then the unexpected happens, something out of your control, a change in investment, a change in staffing, a key team member leaves. Tell us an example of when you had to pivot and some of the steps that our students may want to think of if they got to that point where they had to pivot off of their original plan.
Yeah, I think I think one of the hardest parts that I had to come across was that kind of moment of like realizing I couldn't raise the capital to kind of build the business I wanted to build. And so it was definitely a kind of a moment of having to take a step back and kind of really think about what, as an entrepreneur, like what service am I trying to provide? Like, do I really, who am I trying to, answer questions like what service do I want to provide? Who am I trying to help? What do I want to be spending my day doing? And that was, I think that third question was a little bit the most influential when I realized, as an entrepreneur, if I build one business, I would spend my day, potentially working at a machine and doing large scale production. Whereas in another business, I could actually be doing interviews with entrepreneurs, learning what they do, how they work, and finding ways to help them build the businesses. And in the end, that was what I was much more excited about doing. And so that moment of kind of pivoting, can be a hard one. But I think lastly, and I know I'm kind of rambling with this response, but
it's fine. It's an answer.
the pivot can be tiny, right? Or it could be huge. and I think sometimes it takes at different moments in my career, like I did lots of tiny pivots. And then I think once I kind of got to this larger moment of realizing the investment it would take and the barriers to that investment, it took a willingness to do a bigger pivot and to really say, you know what, I can still be an entrepreneur and still support businesses, but in a very different way. Rather than, again, doing production for other people, I can learn about their business needs and help them fill those gaps in that way.
No, and I think you bring up an excellent point that, often when you look back at your career, at a successful project, um, it's not, the 2 or 3 big moments that made a difference, right? It's the little moments, it's the little decisions. It's sticking to, you mentioned your values before, it's sticking to your values, your personal values, your company values as you make those decisions, which probably has a broader impact on your career than, 1 or 2 big make or break moments.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I think that was something that I learned more through experience than from somebody kind of teaching me, was that just kind of like prototyping, right? Like I got to a point of understanding that just like you can prototype a product, you can prototype a business idea. And so again, like there's a willingness to like have an idea for a business and talk to people about it and share with other people, even if it's not fully fleshed out, if it's really just an idea. And that's something I've been doing a lot with the Urban Manufacturing Alliance, and that's getting lots of feedback. Is, we really can talk directly to businesses and different parts of the ecosystem and say, we've got this new idea for service. What do you think? And again, very, very quickly, you actually get more input about what that customer really wants and needs, and then we can integrate that. And it might take 5 or 6 different phone calls, but you can go from, even if you only retain 50% of your ideas from the first phone call, as you have more and more calls, you get more and more things right. And so by the 5th or 6th phone call, you're talking to another customer and they're on board from the get-go. They're in agreement. They know that, you understand their needs and they're excited about the idea you're talking about. So I would say, for any entrepreneur, again, just like you can prototype a product, don't be afraid to kind of prototype a business idea.
No, that's good advice. That's kind of interesting. And I would imagine, I was trying to think, there's probably other things you could do. How do you take that same concept and prototype things in your personal life, in school,
Yeah.
As you're trying to make those decisions that are important to you. I'm going to remind our students that if you would like to ask a question, go ahead now and raise your hand. And again, if we'll ask you to turn on your camera and turn on your mic while we're hopefully waiting for a few of those. Andrew, as we kind of enter the home stretch here, you've talked about this ecosystem and this community. We talk to our students, particularly pre-pandemic, and we're working to kind of get back to when we used to have our group events, right? And the importance of building a network. Could you tell a little bit from your perspective, not just as an entrepreneur, but just in general, why you think building that network is so important?
Yeah, so a personal anecdote, like I went to design school, and one of the things we learned, or we were kind of taught / learned, was you could do a lot yourself, right? Like you could stay up really late and make a prototype, and you could stay up and make, a website, and you could do your own social media, and you could do your own kind of number crunching. So we kind of got taught this like mentality of do it all yourself. And I would say that's not a very good mentality, right? It's actually I would say it's the opposite. It tends to be detrimental. It tends to sort of make us think that we can be good at everything. But I think as entrepreneurs quickly learn, is developing a product and then running a business to deliver that product requires lots of different insights. It requires, understanding your customers. It requires understanding marketing, understanding capital and cash flow, material purchases. Like there's so much that goes into building a business, even from a small business growing, that the idea that you could somehow magically know it all is really misleading. And so even without having lots and lots of resources, you can take advantage of all sorts of subject matter experts out there who host free workshops in marketing, and by participating in those conversations, you'll meet people who who are interested in helping out entrepreneurs. You can, the Free Library of Philadelphia, for example, they have all sorts of support programming for entrepreneurs, and some of those services are also free. Like there's business plan writing initiatives. There's how to do marketing. So I would definitely say the more quickly you can realize the network helps you get where you want to go versus the mentality if you have to do it all yourself. I think the kind of quicker you can get to a higher level of success. And it's not always easy. Like I'm not the most extroverted person out there, and so it does take a bit of effort to kind of put yourself out there. But for the most part, those entrepreneur services are really supportive, right? They're supposed to be supportive, and so even if you're not so confident in your idea, they're ready for that. They're prepared to be able to kind of meet you where you are and provide those that kind of cheerleading as well as that kind of expertise.
Well, and I imagine that cheerleading can be such a big component of that as well. There's value in surrounding yourself with people with shared experiences and what you can learn organically in some ways from sharing your successes and failures. And I would imagine you've seen some of that as well.
Oh, definitely, and that's where that kind of maybe goes back to that decision making question too. Is if you learn from other peers and other entrepreneurs, like how they navigated some of what they navigated, you can gain from their expertise, right? You can learn how other people made decisions, and then you could incorporate that into your work as well. So finding entrepreneurs that have similar products or very different products, but really, if you're stumped, you're not sure what to do. That engaging with people who've maybe gone through it before to help kind of find potential guidance to help in that decision making process. But yeah, I definitely have learned a lot from my peers and helped figure out, again, for myself, like through hearing their stories and their successes and their challenges, I was able to kind of be in their shoes and think about, well, do I really want to go down this path or do I want to take a different path?
So speaking of that different path, two things. First of all, I'm going to last call for questions if our students have any. So I always like to end. So think of that path. If you could go back in time and speak to the high school Andrew, what was the one thing you would want to make sure high school Andrew would know about his future?
Know about my future?
Well, or better prepare for your future, I guess is a better way.
I think that learning of like the more you can connect to others and share your work with others sooner, I think that would have been the most valuable thing, because I think there was a long period of time where I knew I was interested in building a business, but I really thought it had to be done by myself. It really had to be kind of me, tinkering away, keeping my head down, trying to do it all. And so I think if I had known that and known the importance of those types of, like, a willingness to share ideas, a willingness to get feedback, a willingness to learn I was wrong, and find people who could then provide support and feedback as to how to improve upon it. I think that's the biggest thing I wish I had learned earlier.
Okay. Well, Andrew, as I promised, it goes fast. We run out of time very quickly. I do want to thank you for spending your time with us this evening. We will, as we always do, post this on the Junior Achievement page on YouTube. And as we've started new this year, our new JA Company Program Speaker Series, which you can find on Spotify. I do want to give a plug for next week, in which we will have Adam Nelson from Philly Esports as our guest. And with that, I'm going to sign off. Andrew, again, thank you so much for your time. And everyone, have a good week, and I will see you next Monday.